The Nintendo Switch is finally here. It's a hybrid of console and portable systems, forged by the lessons learned over 30 years of hardware development, and steeped in the DNA of a company that loves to do things their own way. For Nintendo, each new piece of hardware is a chance to make a fresh start, but nothing is completely new. If you look closely, you can see patterns, ideas echoing through time. Some ideas changed the industry, some completely flopped, and some ideas just weren't quite ready yet. But they all reveal bits and pieces of the identity of the company that created them. To understand what's in store for the Switch's future, maybe we can look for answers in Nintendo's past. Every Nintendo system comes with a piece of iconic hardware, its controller. The Switch and its Joy-Con controllers are no different. Out of the box, you'll be able to choose from several different control schemes depending on the game you're playing. Having so many different controller options has been common for Nintendo, going back to the very beginning. The NES first came bundled with its original rectangular controllers. Soon after, Nintendo released the NES Advantage, which had an arcade stick, turbo controls, and could plug into both Player 1 and Player 2 ports at the same time. Then came the NES Max, which had this awful, terrible, circle pad looking thing, instead of just a regular D-pad. Even in the mid-90s, very late in the console's life cycle, Nintendo released the NES Controller 2, a dog-bone-shaped redesign of the original rectangle. The SNES controller was more comfortable to hold, and added more buttons to allow for more complex games, but the design stayed the same throughout the SNES era. On the N64, Nintendo started supporting more than one control scheme on a single controller. You could grip the 3-prong controller in 2 different ways. It was unique, and sometimes painful. But even though game designers were given more options, just about every game was designed for the controller to be held with one hand on the analog stick. Starting in the early 2000s on the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, Nintendo started experimenting with motion controls. Kirby's Tilt and Tumble, Yoshi's Topsy Turvy, and WarioWare Twisted came with custom hardware embedded in the game cartridges to detect tilting and shaking. The DS didn't support motion controls, but it still had plenty of new features. It added more buttons for more complex handheld games, a built-in microphone, and its biggest innovation was its touch-capable second screen. Smartphones weren't nearly as widespread at the time the DS was released, so the DS was one of the few places where games with touch controls were being developed. Having 2 close screens was used to great effect on the DS and later the 3DS, but the idea did not translate as well when Nintendo tried to adapt dual-screen gaming to the Wii U. The love affair with motion controls kicked into high gear with the Wii, but the results were mixed. Wii Sports, arguably still the best game ever built for motion controls, was available at the launch for the Wii, but more games of that quality were few and far between. The Wii Motion Plus was able to improve the responsiveness of the hardware, but it wasn't cheap, and it only made a difference in a few games. For every game that used motion controls well, like Wii Sports and WarioWare's Smooth Moves, you can find dozens of others that just shoved it in as an afterthought. Twilight Princess had a ton of waggle, Wii Music was a disaster through and through, and look at all this shovelware. Oh my god. The basic Wii Remote was designed primarily around motion controls, but Nintendo knew that there would still be games released on the Wii that would work best with a standard controller. Classic games available on the Virtual Console, for instance, weren't designed to use motion controls at all, so Nintendo made more controllers, like in the NES days. The Wii Classic controller had a design that echoed the SNES controller, which worked great for those older games, but also had a more modern layout, with analog sticks and 4 shoulder buttons, which made it perfect for more complex games. Nintendo also released the Wii Classic Controller Pro, which felt even nicer to hold. After the Wii, Nintendo was again wrestling with how to support traditional games while still trying to make their next console innovative. The novelty of motion control games was wearing off, so Nintendo needed a new hook.
This is the new controller for Wii U.
With the Wii U gamepad, Nintendo added a big screen in the middle of a traditional controller to allow new game styles without hindering traditional designs too much. But because of hardware limitations and the expense of each gamepad, Nintendo only allowed one to be connected to a single console at a time. Nintendo seemed unsure of the Wii U's main hook, and to try to fix this problem, they threw the kitchen sink at it. In one way or another, the Wii U works with half of all controllers Nintendo has ever released. The Wii U gamepad, a new Wii U Pro controller, everything ever released on the Wii, a straight up 3DS, and you can even hook up an adapter for GameCube controllers. Granted, only for one game, but eh. The flood of controllers led to practical problems. Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U lets you choose between all of these options, which led to an explosion of control schemes. With so many options, it makes it tough for a game designer to focus on making each control option feel good. But the biggest problem with the Wii U gamepad was with its main gimmick, the center screen. It was rarely used effectively. Star Fox Zero used it, but it felt clunky, overwhelming, and a bit forced. Some games that could have used the screen to do amazing things that wouldn't be possible on a traditional controller were never even developed. I'm looking at you, Pokemon Snap 2. It's never gonna happen. What we've talked about so far is a history of standard controllers, but for every generation, Nintendo also put out weird hardware tailor-made for specific games. The NES had the Zapper and the Power Pad, the SNES had the Super Scope for a small handful of shooters, and the mouse which worked for Mario Paint and a few strategy games. Then came the bongos, the Hey You Pikachu microphone thing, the Mario Party microphone thing, the Wii microphone thing, the balance board, all the plastic crap you could stick a Wii remote into, and even the cancel vitality sensor show that Nintendo always tries to work unusual control schemes into their systems, even if those were abandoned almost immediately. The repeating pattern you see through Nintendo's history is a broadening of possibilities with control schemes. The Switch does this by just including everything. Every control scheme that Nintendo has released before is showing up on the Switch. Motion controls, a touchscreen, a complete set of buttons, and Bluetooth support for connecting whatever random controller idea they'll have in the future. This, hopefully, is a refined version of what the Wii U was trying to accomplish. But all of the pitfalls of having too many control options apply here too. There could also be a problem with how the Switch supports touch gaming. When the Switch is docked, players won't have a touchscreen handy, so game designers have to consider that limitation. There are even a few games that won't be playable on your TV at all, but even if it's tough to work around, it's not an impossible problem to solve. We've already seen games adapt touch controls to standard controllers successfully. Console and PC ports of mobile games do this all the time. The Switch gives developers the opportunity to build or port games with just about any modern game design. What remains to be seen is whether developers take the time and effort to make something that feels right for their game. So, the Switch's controller looks solid, but Nintendo changes more than just the controller between generations. For instance, Nintendo loves Rumble. They created the Rumble Pack, which put force feedback in a home console for the first time. It was such a big hit, Nintendo shoved it into the Game Boy Color as fast as they could, even though the system wasn't at all designed to let you plug in peripherals. Instead, Nintendo stuck a motor inside the Game Boy cartridge itself. Put a AAA battery into Pokemon Pinball, Top Gear Pocket, or Disney's The Little Mermaid 2 Pinball Frenzy, and you get Rumble on the go. All of Nintendo's consoles going forward, the GameCube, the Wii, and the Wii U, were designed with Rumble built in from the beginning. The Switch is shipping with HD Rumble, which promises much better fidelity. 1-2-Switch uses HD Rumble to mimic the feeling of marbles rolling around in a box. And first reports are that the tech is really impressive, but cool tech doesn't guarantee there will be games that put it to good use. We might have to wait for a new WarioWare game to explore what HD Rumble can really do. Each Joy-Con comes with HD Rumble, But the right Joy-Con has one special feature, an IR sensor. IR tech has been used in older Nintendo products to do a bunch of different things. The Game Boy Color tried to replace the physical link cable and let two systems communicate with an IR sensor at the top. But it was unreliable and finicky to use. Hardly any game supported it. The sensor would only work if your systems were this close to each other, and you never touched the Game Boy while it was trying to transmit data. You couldn't even trade Pokemon with this thing, which is probably for the best. I mean, losing a shiny Charizard in a trade because someone bumped your Game Boy would have broken a lot of hearts. Nintendo abandoned IR tech for wireless communication, but brought it back on the Wii and the Wii U. IR works great for sensing depth, and some of the minigames in 1-2 Switch use it for that. Unfortunately, since only one of the two Joy-Cons has the IR sensor inside, it will be less likely for someone to have all the hardware needed to play a multiplayer game that uses IR. So it most likely will only be used for single-player experiences, or its limitations could make it too difficult to use effectively, and it could be forgotten completely. The Switch is the first Nintendo home console in more than 15 years to use cartridges. Cartridges on the NES, SNES, N64, and the Game Boy were completely custom-designed hardware. Nintendo had the freedom to put special chips inside the cartridges themselves to do things that weren't possible on the basic hardware. On the SNES, Star Fox, Stunt Race FX, and a few more games had a Super FX chip inside the cartridge itself. Super Mario RPGs shipped with a Super Accelerator 1 chip. Super Mario Kart and Pilot Wings had a DSP-1 processor inside each cart. Without the extra chips, the hardware inside the SNES couldn't render the 3D graphics used in each of those games. This is a really crazy approach to take. It's really expensive to do and really inefficient since the chip is only usable for that one game. If you look in old game ads, you'll see Nintendo cartridges selling new for $70 or more, which would be over $120 today after inflation. This extra hardware was the reason why each game costs so much. The technology inside modern game cartridges is completely different from what it was in the 90s. Instead of using old ROM cartridges, the DS, 3DS, and Switch use flash memory cards, which are much cheaper. Instead of including processors inside each cartridge, modern systems like the Switch are built with a powerful GPU inside the system itself. Good thing too, it would be tough to fit another processor inside that teeny tiny cartridge. Nintendo usually supports backwards and cross-generational compatibility with each new console. They released the Super Game Boy for the SNES, which was more or less a cartridge with the guts of a Game Boy, minus the screen. Pop in a Game Boy game and you could play it right there on your TV. Later, you could do the same thing with GBA games on the GameCube with the Game Boy player. Just about every game was compatible, even games with unusual hardware, like Kirby's Tilt and Tumble. The DS could play any Game Boy Advance game out of the box. The 3DS let you plug in DS carts. The Wii could read GameCube discs and included 4 ports for GameCube controllers. And the Wii U played Wii games. But the streak is going to break with the Switch. It doesn't take discs, and DS and 3DS cartridges won't fit into it. So the Virtual Console will be the only way to play old games on the system. This has big drawbacks. You will almost certainly have to rebuy games you already own. Hopefully, the game list on the Virtual Console will be extensive, and hopefully, Nintendo won't charge too much. But still, the loss in backwards compatibility is a break in tradition and will be a black mark on the system. There's one more surprise than the Switch. Nintendo's new online service is going to be super weird. You will need to pair your Switch to a smartphone app to play online multiplayer. This isn't the first time Nintendo has come up with a really weird way to connect to the internet. There was even a modem released in Japan back in 1988 called the Famicom Net System. There wasn't even a World Wide Web back then. Your console made a direct connection to a Nintendo server that gave weather forecasts, stock information, and if you were feeling lucky, you could bet on horse racing right from your own home. The Super Famicom had something even weirder. In the mid-90s, Nintendo released the Satellaview. It was a satellite modem attachment that read data beamed down from space. To save a game to your Satellaview, you needed to turn on the system and start downloading at a specific time of day. Even weirder, some games use SoundLink, which let SNES games have full voice acting beamed down from the satellite. On the SNES, there was even a Zelda game, BS Zelda no Densetsu, which had voice-acted cutscenes. The voice acting data was too big to save to your system, so you could only play SoundLink games during the time of day that game was being broadcast. Even later, when Nintendo systems connected to the internet in a normal way, there were still quirks. Friend codes on the Wii and Wii U are clunky, and downloadable games on the 3DS are licensed to the hardware, not your account. It's a major hassle to get your downloadable 3DS games back if you lose your system. The Switch's reliance on a mobile app is going to be a problem for people who don't own a smartphone, but designing the service like this neatly solves a few problems. The Switch will let you play online anywhere with a cell connection, which is great for bus and train commuters, and you won't even have to pay for an extra line on your phone bill. The app will also give Nintendo the option to use the smartphone to do things without having to build more hardware into the Switch. The camera, GPS, cloud storage, just about anything your phone can use could also be used by the Switch, if Nintendo wanted to. There's one more catch with the Switch's new online service. It won't be free. The service is roughly half the cost of similar services from Sony and Microsoft, but we don't know yet what features we'll get for the price. Nintendo will be offering free games with the cost of the subscription, but they will only be available for a limited time. The upshot is that fees should pay for improvements to the service, faster speeds, better reliability, and more developers who can fix problems and design new features. The Switch iterates on what Nintendo has learned about gaming hardware over the last 30 years. The controller, the games, the hardware, and its portability combine to make a console that feels new, but above all, feels like a Nintendo. That goes both ways. Just like how past Nintendo hardware hasn't always met expectations, there are plenty of ways for the Switch to disappoint if Nintendo isn't careful. But the foundation of the system is solid. In the Switch, you'll find Nintendo's past, updated to the present, and you'll see their vision for the future of gaming.